The siege situation is a go, and I am your host, The Crackoon, and we are here for the very first time for this podcast. Obviously, this is episode number one because it is the very first time. Go figure. uh, Firstly, considering this is the first ever edition of this podcast, I guess you could say, I feel as though it's permitting that I should generally give a quick breakdown of my history with Rainbow Six Siege, as well as where the idea for the podcast itself kind of came from and the inception of the podcast, I guess you could say. So, firstly, briefly, I have been playing Rainbow Six Siege since the closed technical alphas, or the technical test alphas of 2015. Obviously, was then involved with the closed alphas and the closed betas, the open betas, and then the game since release, all the way up till now, which is year 2, season 1, more or less, give or take a week or two. And basically, the idea for this podcast itself came around based on the fact that I thoroughly enjoy this game and appreciate this game for what it is. And I mean, I'm infatuated by this game as well, which is it's kind of been a running scheme, I guess, with my general gaming history. I guess you could say is that I'm always alert to first-person shooters, and none as well, none have been that alluring to me as Rainbow Six is currently, which is quite strange considering. But generally, that being said, I feel as though I wanted a platform, an open platform, to basically be able to showcase my opinions and thoughts about the game and the way that I see the game currently, as well as the way that I think the game is currently going, and basically just put my opinions out there. And I stream regularly, and that's obviously a way to put my opinions out there, but sometimes I can't as cohesively get across my ideas and my logic and thinking behind certain aspects of the game and the way that I think it's going, because obviously you're playing the game at the same time, you're talking at the same time, talking to the chat, so on and so forth. It's it's an ongoing process, whereas when I'm doing this podcast, I can sit down, I can cohesively think about my thoughts and showcase them in a condensed kind of focused stream to put them out there in the form of the C Situation podcast. I'm hoping that the podcast itself will transcend into many different genres. For instance, this week it's going to be more concise and relating around the topics of the Velvet Shell DLC that has just come out. And as you can see on the left hand side, we'll be talking about the G.E.O operators as well as the Coastline DLC map. And that's basically it. Firstly, though, the one topic that you do see over there on the left is SITREP, which will be the situation report. The situation report will basically be a breakdown of the previous week's news as well as the upcoming week's news. Sometimes this will vary because, with any constantly changing medium, whatever it may be, the TV industry, movie industry, music industry, sometimes there's more news on certain weeks than there is on other weeks, and then sometimes there's huge influxes of news on one week, depending on whatever it may be. So, there's no difference there with Siege. Sometimes there will be more news on one week for Siege, and then less news the next week for Siege. So it's hit and miss. So this will vary. This topic will vary, but it will always be present. So firstly, I guess I should go into the previous week's news, which is generally a touchy subject, but we'll see how it goes down. But what the flying fuck is wrong with the Rainbow Six Siege servers? I am dumbfounded by how inconsistent these servers have been for the past week, maybe two. It depends. I'm dumbfounded. I guess the best example of this is the PS4 servers have been truly broken, and I don't play on PS4, but I feel for the PS4 players out there, because honestly, I have not seen as many tweets relating towards the servers of this game being restarted on a particular platform than I have for PS4 in the past week. It literally seems as though every single day the PS4 servers have required a emergency maintenance or a restart, or they have been disrupted and then required a restart, or so on and so forth. But generally this applies to all platforms right now, and it seems to be a consistent theme as far as DLC releases go for this game, because it seems that every time a DLC gets released for this game, an influx of players come back to play, and the servers can't cope. They fall flat on their face. I don't know why they do, but apparently Ubisoft just can't keep their servers up to scratch as far as being able to handle the influx of players that come back to play this game whenever there's a DLC release. It's almost as if Ubisoft aren't aware that players are going to come back to this game more than usual to play it when there's a DLC out. I mean, who would have thought that you release some new content and people want to play the new content? I mean, it makes sense to me, but maybe not to them, so I don't know. But honestly, it's like I said, it's a running theme that the server's always disrupted. And I'm talking about the matchmaking system, I'm talking about the general, well, I guess matchmaking errors kind of ties into that, and network errors as far as that's concerned. I'm talking about hit detection and lag compensation and the whole 9 yards as far as anything relating towards the network infrastructure is concerned. It's a tricky business. It's a pretty fucking tricky business. Honestly, that goes for the previous week's news. There's not too much of a news from last week, other than Velvet Shell and whatnot. Upcoming week's news, there's even less because, once again, last week's news was all about Velvet Shell, so this is kind of like a quiet time. But the biggest piece of news that I've noticed or picked up upon is that there is going to be a patch release tomorrow for, well, patch release 2.1.1, which will be a general all-around fix for bugs and errors and whatnot that have arisen from the release of Velvet Shell. There should be some. I'm not going to run down through the entire patch notes. You can go and check them out for yourselves if you're that intrigued. I glanced at them before, but there's two particular topics within the patch notes, or two particular fixes or changes within the patch notes that I want to pick up upon. The first is the related fixes to the G.E.O operators, which is definitely interesting because, as some of you may be aware or may not be aware, there was a massive, massive oversight as far as black mirrors were concerned, based on the fact that attackers could essentially destroy the mirror from the outside, basically rendering the mirror useless. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit when I'm talking about the G.E.O operators as far as their abilities are concerned for both Mirror and Jackal. But it's definitely a strange one, but I mean, that's being fixed is basically what I'm trying to get across right now, as well as a multitude of other fixes to the G.E.O operators and the game and the maps and the gameplay and other operators and other weapons and bugs and glitches and la-di-da. That's basically what the patch is about. The second one, which I think is more interesting, which has already been spoken about as well, so it's not as if this is generally news, is the optics adjustment tweak or patch, I guess you could say, which was spoken about at a Rainbow Six Invitational, and it basically surrounds the whole concept of optic sights on weapons aren't perceived as the same optic sights on other weapons. So, for example, when you have a longer barreled weapon, say for instance Glaz's rifle, and you put a hollow sight on it, that hollow sight is mounted further along the mounting rail, so it looks farther away. Further away, sorry, I don't say further away from your perspective, so it isn't perceived as the same kind of sight that it would be when it's on a shorter barreled weapon, such as an SMG or some sort. So that's generally going to be the whole scheme of things that's being changed as far as the optics adjustments are concerned. It'll be interesting to see how far they go with it. I don't want to say that is too much of a drastic change, but honestly, we'll have to see how it goes. It's a tricky one. I'm not saying that it's not a good use of time for Ubisoft, but you know, it is what it is. They could be doing other things, but they're doing this, so you know, no problem to me. Whatever, it is what it is. It's not a bad thing, and it's not a good thing. It's just whatever. It's an okay thing. It is what it is. If you really think this is a big problem and you're glad that it's being changed, then sure, by all means, do it. Do it. Do it. That basically wraps up the situation report. Like I said, it will vary from news week to week, and upcoming news next week there isn't that much about it. So I'm basically going to bypass this topic and move straight onto the topic that I want to get to, which is the G.E.O. operators. Interesting topic. There's not as much that I want to talk about with the G.E.O. operators as there is with the map coastline. I'm just going to delve right into it right now and just go straight in with Mirror, and particularly Mirror's abilities, and discuss them and the way that I perceive her black mirrors, as well as what I think's right with it and what I think's wrong with it, and maybe what could be do with getting a little bit of tweaking here, a little bit of tweaking there. Is debatable. Firstly, I think it's a really interesting meta to add to the game of these one-way black mirrors that can be used on objectives and in all sorts of different ways in terms of the meta of the game. Whether it's like putting it on an unreinforced wall and then wall banging through it, or putting it on a reinforced wall on the outside of the objective, which is maybe an objective that isn't as easy to defend as others. But then you basically position yourself in the surrounding rooms looking into the objective rather than actually being in the objective looking out of the objective. So, you know, generally it's a really interesting meta to add to the game, and it's a good addition as far as I'm concerned. I do want to touch on a few topics right now about the general ease of destructibility and the way that the black mirrors are actually rehabilitated, or I guess, you know, how'd you put it? I don't know if there's an actual term that they use in game, but I guess broken would be the more generalized term to use, or how you trigger the black mirrors themselves so that you can actually remove the bulletproof glass. And that's basically, it's basically more about the ease of destructibility of how I don't particularly like the fact that it's just a little gas canister that can be shot or melee hit or whatever, shot by a twitch drone or hit by a frag grenade, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Don't generally buy into the whole ease of destructibility of the black mirrors themselves. I feel as though it could have been done more effectively, and I feel like it was maybe a balancing issue that they decided to do it in this manner, but I can't really see why they would decide to do it like this rather than adding a lever, the same as when you're reinforcing a wall, like the same lever action of some sort, or allowing Mirror the ability to maybe not have enemies or teammates do it, which would then surely balance it out, but then also allow her to have maybe a trigger detonator switch, the same as, you know, triggering a C4 or whatever, and then being able to destroy the mirrors. I just feel that maybe Ubisoft have decided to make the mirrors available to be used by anybody, whether it's attackers or defenders, and that's maybe led to more of an ease of destructibility of the mirrors, which might not lead to that much effectiveness from the mirrors to, I guess, the average player in a sense. And obviously there's all the problems that can arise from that, which is generally people might troll you on your team, or, you know, they might just get instantly shot out by a twitch drone, or, you know, that might be like the main focus of target for an attacker, and once an attacker's shot that, maybe they get a line of sight onto another player or onto an objective that you necessarily didn't initially want. So it could be used against the defenders, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. So it's not specifically purely overpowered as far as defenders are concerned, but it then could be, I guess, used by the attackers in that sense to basically, well, as a weapon against the defenders, you know, which is interesting, and I understand that's probably balancing and whatnot, but overall I feel as though that makes the effectiveness of the black mirrors very hit and miss. It's you know, it's a tricky one. It'll be interesting to see how far the meta goes and how much the meta develops, I guess you could say, as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, that basically wraps it up. There's not too much that I really wanted to cover on the black mirrors. It's straightforward enough, you know. It's a black mirror, bulletproof piece of glass that can be put on walls, reinforced or not, and can be shot, or, well, can be destroyed by shooting a little tiny gas canister. Also has a massive glitch. Like I said, that'll be patched tomorrow. Secondly, I want to go into Mirror's weapons. Overall, I would just want to Well, firstly, I want to say that I do enjoy the SMG, the Vector, and I like the concept of having a shotgun secondary. Not all for the idea of having a shotgun primary as well as a shotgun secondary. I think it's a bit weird that people could run two shotguns, and I don't really think it's necessary, but I mean, to each his own. Um, but firstly, I'm just gonna. I mean, I think the shotgun secondary is definitely a good tool as far as that's concerned, of having the SMG combination with the shotgun secondary, and then the shotgun secondary allows for you to make kill holes and blow up, well, shoot through hatches, and I guess in those circumstances where you are extremely close range, maybe on an enemy's flank, it's good for a quick, easy takedown. But it's not an auto shotgun, or semi-auto shotgun, sorry. Well, no, it is a semi-auto shotgun, but it's not like... Oh, it's pump action, sorry. But it's not... I'm getting confused right now. Semi-auto, pump action, single-fire shotgun. What? It's a pump action shotgun, so... You know, it's not semi-auto, so it's in the sense of... You can just mow people down, multiple targets. So there's at least some kind of balance into that in terms of having it as a secondary weapon. So you can't really complain about it as far as that's concerned. But I more or less see it as a tool rather than an actual viable option as far as a weapon. I still prefer the pistol secondary of the USP. I mean, it is what it is. Moving on quickly to the Vector. The Vector is, you know, it is what it is. Super high rate of fire. Not that ridiculously high damage. I was going through the weapons and basically making comparisons to the P90 as to how I think the P90 is overall a better weapon, but there's a reason why people don't use the P90 is because the damage is too low, and it's kind of a similar situation right now with the Vector. I think, don't quote me on this, but it was a while ago that I actually checked this out as well. I think the P90 has 400 higher rate of fire. I mean, less rate of fire than the Vector, but it also has over double the ammunition. But you know, it's really kind of a trade-off. I don't know, it's tricky. Basically what I'm trying to get at is I'm not a massive fan of the 20 round magazine in the Vector. I think with the rate of fire being so high that magazine can just gone like it's nobody's business, and the reload speed and then whatever happens after that, it's a bit of a tricky situation. I just don't think they generally contrast and work well together, and I fail to see the reason why Ubisoft wouldn't just give the Vector a 30 round magazine. I mean, it's not as if, you know, it's not as if they couldn't have given it a 30 round magazine. I'm not too aware of the weapon in real life, whether or not it does actually use a 20 round magazine, but I just feel for this game, this being a video game and not real life, I feel as though it could have done with a 30 round magazine, just because I don't think the concept of the weapon really works well with the super high rate of fire with a really low rate of damage, as well as a low capacity magazine. It's a bit tricky, but honestly, it is what it is. I doubt they're going to change it at this point. It's just my opinions generally upon it. Going to move on to Jackal right now. Firstly, I want to talk about Jackal's abilities and his Inox Model 3 or whatever the hell it's called. His black light that can track footsteps. I think it's a really good gadget or an ability to add to the game, because it has a massive practical use in terms of gaining intel as to where players are and where players aren't. For instance, you can basically pie out on a room, and if you see footsteps in that room leading to a particular corner, you're like, oh, there's an enemy over there. But then also on top of that, if you go into a room and you're using the gadget or the black light or whatever you want to call it, and you don't see footsteps in a room, it's also good intel as far as that's concerned, because you now know that there's nobody in that room. So it's not only just for detecting footsteps, it's also about clearing areas and locations of the map to know that there's not enemies there, which I think is like a really good contrast, because a lot of people I feel will be like, oh, there's footsteps, let me follow those footsteps. Whereas in the way that I particularly play it is, oh, there's not footsteps in here. That means I can still play normally and know that I've got the security of potentially not having somebody come on my flank. You know what I'm saying? Um, but that being said, I also think that the whole tracking concept that they've added as well is kind of gimmicky. I'm not saying that I'm against it, but I just think it's a bit gimmicky as far as that's concerned. I don't know. I mean, I get the idea. They wanted to add a little bit more to Jackal, but I just feel as though it's not maybe executed in the right manner. It's I don't know. It's pretty hit and miss as far as it's concerned because I've never really used that ability that frequently in that manner of speaking. I just use it in the way of detecting footsteps and then relying upon this. Well, I guess the playstyle that I've already developed rather than adjusting it to now go trace people's footsteps and stuff like that, you know? But I mean, that's basically what I mean by as far as it's gimmicky. But overall, I think it's a good ability, and once again, another good meta to add to the game. So, you know, Velvet Shell kind of knocked it out of the park as far as that's concerned. I guess the map is where shit will get a bit skittish, but we'll get to that. Secondly, I want to go on to Jackal's weapons. Not too much to really cover here. It's the same scenario with the SMG. I mean, with the shotgun secondary. I think it's a good tool. It's a good tool to have as an attacker, maybe more so than it is for a defender to have. Just because you have such an abundance of long-range weapons as an attacker without that many short-range weapons, which has obviously been changed with this because of the inclusion of the SMG. But you know, I think Ubisoft have acknowledged the fact that it's a bit stale to have such a huge abundance of assault rifles as attackers without that many close range weapons other than, I guess, the occasional shotgun here and there, which aren't too frequently used, I guess you could say, in that manner. But yeah, I mean, like, I like the idea of the shotgun secondary as an attacker more than I do with a defender, as for using it as a tool, as well as, once again, giving the attacker a bit more of an advantage. Or a bit more of a leg up, I guess you could say. Close range. And that, once again, also kind of goes for the SMG, because it's the first SMG the attackers have got. And, you know, I think it goes well. It all ties together. It's a strong combination. I'm not saying that I'd necessarily use the combination together, but that's not to say that you couldn't go and use the combination together with an all-around super CQB operator with an SMG and a shotgun secondary. It works well together. Don't really want to talk about the C7E that much. Strong AR as usual, with all of the DLC assault rifles that seem to be getting released. I mean, that's generally what it is. There's another point I want to touch on right now, which was mentioned at the Rainbow Six Invitational, which was basically about how they were saying that this DLC was more of an insight as to where the developer want to take the game, and about how this DLC is generally stronger than, I guess, previous DLCs, but also more cohesive with a theme that, firstly, with Mirror, they want to change the meta of the game completely with actually adding meta-changing abilities to the game, which haven't really been seen before. As well as them with Jackal also adding meta-changing abilities to the game, which also then, having said that, leans maybe towards the future technology side of things, because, I mean, the Black Mirror itself is really kind of basic as far as that's concerned, but the Inox Model 3 or the Black Light that Jackal has is kind of future tech. It might be the most futuristic tech aspect or ability that's been added to the game, or that's even in the game to now. Maybe that compared to, I'd say, something like Jaeger, I guess, or maybe not the Twitch drone as much, but, you know, it is what it is. I mean, this is basically what I'm trying to say, is that this DLC is meant to be an insight as to where the developers are looking to take or develop the game as far as releasing DLCs in the future are concerned. And it seems as though they're going to be leaning quite heavily towards the whole meta-changing aspect of DLCs rather than just adding, oh, there's you know, I don't know. her banner, and she basically gets a gimmicky novelty thermite charge that can be shot from a distance, and that's it. Or the yokai drone, which we won't talk about, but it is what it is. But yeah, basically that's more or less the wrap up of the G.E.O operators as far as that's concerned. And now we're going to move on to the more hefty subject, which is the Coastline DLC map. LOL. Great overlay, son. What the fuck? Oh my god, the lag is real. LOL. No idea as to why that overlay was wonky, but sure. Teething pains. La di da. Sorry about that. So moving on to Coastline map. Aesthetically, I think the map looks phenomenal, but there's obviously no change there. That's a running theme as far as like the maps in this game go. In terms of horizontal play, I think there are well-defined lines, and the map seems like really focused upon having I guess, defined lanes rather than it being super intricate and vertically intricate as well as horizontally intricate. And there's more of a, I guess, coherent, cohesive setup to the map is what I feel is the biggest point to Coastline right now. So once again, there's more defined lanes, but it also still focuses upon objective play. But then also on the internal of the map, it definitely still allows for flanking because of the symmetrical design of the map. So it's definitely quite a heavy roaming map, but not so heavy in terms of intricacy of, say, like a map like Cafe, where you've got so many points where you can get from floor to floor and stairways and all kinds of different routes and whatnot to find ways to get on the flank of your enemies and so on and so forth. As far as Coastline's concerned, though, I definitely think there's a lack of vertical play as far as that's concerned, and I guess this probably comes down to it only being 2 stories. And this generally leads to some objectives being more overpowered than others, but I feel as though the more that the meta develops, we're going to see more people shooting through floorboards and destroying floors above objectives and then using that to their advantage. It's just about, I guess it's just generally more of a case of time. Once again, you need time for these strategies to develop. I mean, I'm already employing some of these strategies already, but, you know, we're basically just got to see as far as it goes. Because right now it does seem like there's definitely some kind of one-sided balance in the sense of, in terms of some of the objectives, and I guess I'll go into a bit more detail on that. Firstly, I think the lack of outside breachable walls for the attackers is definitely a downside that maybe makes this map more defender heavy. Also, outside verticality of attacks is also a bit of a problem. You know, this is basically coming from the lack of repelling points and the minimal amount of enterable windows onto certain objectives, I guess is kind of like a bit of a downside, and there definitely seems to be a lack of enterable points for attackers to coming from the roof other than one, I guess, breaching hatch, and then the centerpiece of the map, which is the open kind of, I don't know, terrace, I guess you could say, or something like that. But usually that's just a death trap anyway, because it's right in the center of the map and it only takes one person to catch you on the flank. So, you know, it is what it is, but that being said, I feel as though this map has been designed specifically to encourage attackers to basically enter the structure itself, which I guess negates the security and comfort of having an external attack on an objective. Which is it's a fresh dynamic to add to the game, because there's not too many other maps out there that do this, where they're like, oh, you basically have to attack this map from an outside position. I mean, well, no, sorry, from an internal position rather than an outside position. Like, most of the maps in this game are like, right, we can push up to attack, and we can attack from this window, and we're outside, and we have marginal security. You know, so that's kind of the way that I'm perceiving this map right now, and it also ties in heavily with the DLC operators, which I guess I'll get into in a second. But the other point is, that being said, right, it could also become a novelty of not being able to attack from the outside, because it might make the map generally stale just because there's a lack of variation of consistently having to go inside the structure. It'd be nice if you did have a fair few ways to attack externally, as well as then promoting a lot of internal attacks as well, which I feel that maybe in a sense Skyscraper does this better, because a lot of the objectives on Skyscraper usually have at least like one enterable window, but then it also promotes people to go inside the structure and attack in that manner. So yeah, I mean, it might get stale because of the limits of being able to vary your attack. Also, on top of that, it might also become a problem in terms of reducing the element of surprise for attackers, because there's an increased obviously there's an increased probability though of being detected inside the structure based on the exposure to flanks, as well as the detection probability of cameras inside the structure. So this is once again why I think the map is kind of leaning more towards the defender side of things, but you know, it's hard to say. Once again, only time will tell with these things. We've honestly got to see. I mean, it is what it is. I'm interested to see how far the map goes, because some maps are like, I guess Border, for example, is one of these maps where it's like, oh, this is really cool. There's a lot of destructibility and so on and so forth. But after a while, you start to notice, wait, this objective's way more powerful than this objective on Biohazard, and it's, you know, the same with Hostage. And then some of the bomb sites are a bit misproportioned. It's like, well, you know, it's not the most well balanced map, depending on certain objective locations, and it's kind of the same scenario with Coastline, as I've just explained. Honestly, though, I do enjoy the variation that they've added. I think it's a good dynamic to add to make it so that this map is more heavily focused upon internal attacks for attackers. It's interesting though. It's interesting. I guess the bigger point and the bigger overarching scheme is that Ubisoft are renowned for doing, well, designing maps under these circumstances where we really want to showcase the new themes of the DLC. So, for instance, with Border, they had really high ceilings so that Valkyrie could throw her cameras up high, as well as, I guess, less enterable windows onto objectives, so that Blackbeard was utilized in a manner that he maybe wasn't able to be utilized on other maps. So this is a running theme, I guess you could say. They really want to build maps to showcase the new DLC operators that are being released, and obviously Velvet Shell is no different. But I guess more particularly, it poses a bigger question, which is kind of worrying as far as that's concerned, which is the fact that Ubisoft are designing maps specifically for the use of DLC operators, well, the DLC operators that are affiliated to it, sorry, a good idea, or should they generally be designing maps to be overall balanced, no matter on what operators are being used? Could this come around and bite them in the ass? I guess that's the biggest point I'm trying to make right now. Me personally, I feel as though maps should be designed to be generally balanced and not specifically balanced for the use of the operators that may be connected to that DLC, you know? So it's a tricky one. It's a bit tricky. I mean, it's more of an opinionated question. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion on this question and whatnot, and I'm interested to hear other people's opinions and whatnot, but I just think that, I don't know, it's a tough one. I might have to sit on this and then come back to it, because this is a running theme and it doesn't seem like it's going to change. But I just can't help but think that maybe the concept of having maps that are designed specifically for the use of the new operators isn't a good idea in the long run. Just because they might add an operator down the line which completely ruins the concept of the map that's already been released. Like, I don't know, I don't know. It's a tricky one. But as far as that's concerned, that's literally it. That has been the Siege Situation podcast. Interesting topics today. Slight technical difficulties as far as everything's concerned. It was the first episode, so there's going to be a lot of teething issues, I suppose. I'll have to run through and change some certain aspects of it and whatnot, but overall it went quite well, I believe. I mean, maybe I'm biased, obviously. Well, obviously I am biased, but, you know, it is what it is. I've been your host, The Crackoon. My YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch are linked there. Check me out if you want to. Honestly, it doesn't really matter if you don't want to check me out because, you know, it is what it is. It is what it is. It's your prerogative. By all means, check me out, though. That sounds really wrong out of context. Yo, check me out. I don't know, whatever. And on that bombshell, that is it. That has been the Siege Situation podcast, and I'm out. Peace.